Hey guys, it's coreross and Windows 6 News. Today we have the designer notes for the mid-season balancing patch. So of course this brings us the balancing graphs, which are very interesting to look at, and this time they're even more interesting to look at because there's some weird stuff happening which we haven't really seen before in these graphs. So let's start with the attacker graphs. Now, we started getting these graphs about a year and a half ago, and for the attackers, it was very interesting because the highest pick rate operators were basically 5 operators, and most of the time you would find those 5 operators as your enemy or your friendly team, and that was Lion, Ash, Twitch, Hibana, and Thermite. So the balancing team, I think, has actually done a really good job. As we go through the seasons, we can see that they managed to pull them together pretty well. And overall, I was quite impressed with how they did it. And it meant by the end of the graphs, we actually had a far better looking set of operators in decent pick rates. Now, with the most recent balancing, it looks pretty good. Now, the balancing team is attempting to get as many operators close to that cross in the middle as possible. So that means having a win delta where they're not winning too many games and they're not losing too many games, but also their pick rate is not too low and not too high. So of course it's never going to be perfect. They're never ever going to get everybody down there. But the idea is if they can get a bigger chunk in there, they can make a better, more varied game and hopefully have more varied teams out there, making the game far more interesting to play. And you'll also notice that the perfect pick rate goes down as more operators are added to the game. Now, looking at the attacker graph here, there's some really interesting stuff. So Glaz is doing terrible. His pick rate is terrible, his win rate is terrible, and that is a big change from the previous season, and of course that's because of his nerfs. He is getting buffed with the next patch, but it's not going to be much, so I'm curious to see where he'll end up next time. Jacko is also a really big surprise. His pick rate is way too high. It seems crazy, but also his win rate has gone up as well. Now, I think that he hasn't had any balancing changes over that time period as far as I can remember, so it's a surprise to see him go up in both factors significantly. Now, the other factor, of course, will be pick and ban and how that affects these graphs, because it does seem a bit weird. And if we go look at the defender graph in a minute, it might have a bigger effect on those graphs because those ones look really odd. Now, the rest of the operators are actually doing pretty good, I'd say. Like, there's a big chunk above that 20% pick rate, and it means that we're having a very varied game out there, lots of different team compositions, so quite decent. Now, there is some other outliners, probably Nuke. She could be doing better for sure. She is getting a little bit of a buff. It's not much, but maybe it will pick her, pick rate and win rate up a little bit, maybe. Of course, Few's not doing great. Ying's not doing great. Finka's still doing okay for win rate, but her pick rate's really slow. Dockeby's pick rate's really low. Gridlock's pick rate's pretty low as well, but her win delta is actually not too bad. And of course, Lion and Blitz not doing too great in the win deltas. And of course, the nerfs to shields is going to have probably a major effect on Blitz. But Montang up there is got a good pick rate and a good win rate. So he's going to see a big change next season as well when we get the next balancing patches because of those nerfs to shields. So that will be very interesting. So let me know what you think of the attackers graph and the changes and all that coming to those operators. Now let's move on to the defenders. So let's first of all go through the history of these graphs. So to begin with, the defenders were just all over the shop, absolutely covering the graph from top to bottom. And the first round of balancing, they didn't really seem to fix too much. It kind of sent them all over the shop still. And as we got more and more operators in, it wasn't as clean as the attacker graph. Just operators were all over the shop. And win deltas were all the way from the high points to the low points. But by the last season, we did seem to have a decent clump of the defenders in the middle of the graph. So now looking at our new graph, they're back to being all over the shop again. So this is interesting, and I think this is pick and ban must be playing some part in this because Echo's pick rate is crazy, over 70%. Now, he was pretty much the model operator back in the last graph, right in the center, and now he's up there at over 70% pick rate, and I just don't understand that. Like, I know he's been getting banned a lot, so that must be playing a part in these graphs or something, because it doesn't make any sense for him to jump up that pick rate amount. And I can only assume maybe they're not factoring in those banned rounds or something, I'm not sure. Mira as well has really jumped up, which is probably another operator who would be banned a lot at Platinum and Diamond level. So I'm curious if that is why their pick rate looks so high. But the other highlights of this one is definitely Jaeger. His win rate is going up and his pick rate is going up as well. So that might be a little bit of a worry for Jaeger mains. But right now I don't think it's in danger territory for him getting nerfed yet anyway. Legion as well is still continuing to do well. He's been pretty good every season. He's managed to hold a pretty decent win delta and pick rate, and he's continuing to do that along with Valkyrie too. We can see that Doc is nice on the win rate and it's an okay pick rate as well, so he's probably doing quite well. Rook, however, is actually doing really good with win rate, but his pick rate is actually pretty reasonable, so quite an interesting thing there. And we see that swing that we see a lot in every season where the trap operators can move around quite a lot. Frost has actually managed to maintain a top spot even with her nerf, and Capcan has managed to actually go up in the win rate as well. Mozzie continues to be one of the perfect operators in the center there, along with Pulse and Alibi, and we can see Chachanka down the bottom. But look at Castle. What happened? Like, nothing's changed with Castle. He was down at minus 3% win delta, and now suddenly he's up to almost minus 1% win delta. That's a big change, and it's by far the largest change that Castle has ever seen, and there has been no balancing changes to Castle whatsoever. So that is really odd. I don't understand that. I doubt pick and ban has had a factor in that one, so it's weird. Like, why? Why has Castle suddenly went shooting up? Now, we can also see Warden, the brand new operator, doing terrible. He's, interestingly, not getting a buff with the mid-season patch whatsoever, which is odd looking at this graph because it definitely looks like he needs it for pick rate and for win delta. Clash, amazingly, her pick rate has actually gone up. She was banned for most of the season, so that is a really odd pick rate for Clash. I'm not sure how she's there. This is it. These graphs, because I'm not entirely sure how they're putting together the information from the banned operators and the pick and ban operators, that it does make it a little bit odd to read them this time around. And yeah, it's quite curious. Smoke, again, he's kind of in the usual spot. Kaid, with his nitro cells now, has actually managed to push up his pick rate, so good for him, I guess. I guess that is something that people are actually deciding to pick up for that operator. And the rest are actually not too bad. Ella, I guess, has managed to shoot up in win rate, and she has a perfect pick rate. And yeah, that's pretty much it. It's not too bad when it comes to the defenders, but the attackers' graph's always the one that looks more impressive. The balancing team always seems to have a bit more difficulty when it comes to balancing the defenders, when it comes to just the graphs and the numbers. So let's now move on to the further information in this article. So a lot of this we're going to start treading water when it comes to the changes, because we've seen them in the patch notes for the test server yesterday and I went over a lot of them, but there is also some additional information as well. So to start with, we've got the current status, and the first thing they're going over is Twitch. So at the start of the season, they increased the recoil on the F2, and this seems to have had a good effect as it's pushed her pick rate down from 60 to 43%. So that seems to be a good change. And she still has a positive kill to death ratio, down from 1.25 to 1.17. So really not too bad for Twitch, and it doesn't seem like they plan to do any more balancing to her. So at the moment, she seems to be pretty safe. And for Frost, at the beginning of the season, they reduced the Frostmat's health pool down. This has resulted in Frostmats being destroyed 75% of the time instead of 68% of the time before Phantom Sight's release. Now, it doesn't actually mention how many people got caught in them previously. That could have gone up or down, because that's, the percentage wise here isn't a huge difference. So I'm not sure if that could just be a margin of error depending on how people are playing that season, or if it really is to do with the reduction in health, because it's just not a huge difference. And looking at the graphs, it's not really seems to have made a difference in the graphs at all from the previous season. And then with Kaid, they gave him a nitro cell instead of the barbed wire, and they seem to be saying that this has worked. This has actually been to the point of 65% of people now pick the nitro cell over 51% using barbed wire before. So interesting. He has, certainly seems to have picked his pick rate up, so it does seem to have worked, even though I've actually played him less because of it. But I'm not up at the platinum and diamond ranks that these graphs are going into anyway, so I'm not actually a player in those areas. Now moving on to the balance and changes. So this is the stuff we went over already with the patch notes for the test server. There's no major surprises in here at all. We've got the glass changes, which just make his scope a little bit easier to use, and you're going to be able to see through smoke for longer, and hopefully this will be a decent upgrade to glass, but not making him OP like he used to be. Now for Jacko, they're reducing the amount of pings he actually gives off. So it's 1 initial ping, then 4 additional ones after that. They say 5 previously here, but that didn't include the additional ping that you would start with as well. So it's 1 initial ping, 4 pings after that for Jacko. So they do say that they are trying to make him less frustrating to play against, but also they mention that they are looking to continue to make changes to Jacko, but they are trying not to make him irrelevant. So we'll have to see how that plays out. I could see this going badly in the future for Jacko. I'm hoping it won't be a glass thing where he just goes flying down that graph, especially with that really high pick rate in the graphs, and reducing his pings by 1 is just not going to make a huge difference, I think. So I do see them probably trying to do something else as well, but I'm curious what they'll do. Now for Echo, we see that his effect of his drone is going to be reduced. They do say that they hope this is going to result in him getting banned less. Now, I highly doubt that, because rank is now bomb only, and Echo is such a good counter for the diffuser going down. He is so good for that, and he's the only operator that can really counter it in that way. So I just don't see this reducing his bans in ranked, because he's such a good pick for that game mode. And this nerf, although it reduces the effect, it's still going to stop you from putting the diffuser down, so it's going to be an awesome change. Now the other thing is the shields. So big nerfs to the shield. They can now only down someone when they hit with the shield. So that is an interesting change. Going to be interesting to see how that actually plays out on the live servers. And they've also made the bullet spread of firing the gun from behind the shield worse. I really don't know how it's going to play out at all with the shields. Not sure at all. And then from Maverick, they've increased the noise of his blowtorch. Now they actually have an example here, but it's first person perspective from Maverick, and they have like it switching between the new and the old sound, and it sounds the same. So I've actually got an example I've set up from a defender's perspective, and you can really hear the blowtorch now. Like you can hear it from the other side of the room. I wonder how they might, adjust the balancing on that. It seems a little bit too loud. You can actually hear it from the other side of the room, and it just seems maybe too much of a reaction in the other direction. But we'll see how it plays out. And then for Nuck, they've increased the duration of her ability, but also the cooldown is going to take longer as well. Because of her current place in the graph, I really don't expect to see her go much higher. And of course, they haven't done anything with Warden, where I think he's the actual one that probably needs more of a buff than Nuck. So yeah, that's the entire article. It's very interesting. I do wonder how pick and ban plays into the graphs and all that. But anyway guys, let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll catch you next time.